Hello, welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 86 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 12 of Clash of Kings, that's Dany 1. The dragons are back.
That they are. And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter. We're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we're going to provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the TV show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide you with some additional information which will help you, particularly if you're not reading along. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing just fine. How about you?
I'm doing okay. I've got my first vaccine shot.
Oh, yes. Good. All right. Good stuff.
Kind of hurt my shoulder, but otherwise no ill effects.
It did hurt my shoulder, too. Yeah, it hurt worse than I had anticipated.
You've had one?
Yes, just the one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're in the same boat then.
Do you see on the sheet there I have English car crashes?
I do see what it says on the sheet, and I'm very interested to know what we're going to talk about.
Well, so I've been watching two shows lately that are both based in England. CB Strike on HBO Max, because I was a big fan of the book series that...
what was it called?
The show is called CB Strike. It's on
like
HBO
CB?
Max. Like his two initials, CB and then Strike. Cormoran Strike is the name of the main character. He's a private investigator in London.
Never heard of this show.
It's written by J.K. Rowling under a pseudonym, which I can't... Robert Galbraith, I think, is the pseudonym she uses.
I think that's
something like
right,
that.
something like that.
Anyway, I really like the series, and so I've been watching the TV show, which takes place primarily in London. And we've also been watching The Crown, which also takes place primarily in London. And every time they show a scene on the roads, and I see cars coming in the wrong direction at the same time, I think I'm about to see a car crash. So I just wanted to tell you that.
One thing I would like you to tell you is when you visit England, be real careful crossing the road. Do that for me, would you?
Okay, I definitely would need to, yes.
They're coming from the opposite direction than you think they are.
Yeah, it gets me. And even when they're just like sitting in the car, I have to wrap my head around like, wait, why is that person sitting on the wrong side? Oh, okay, they're driving. I get it now.
We're watching Lovecraft Country.
Oh yeah, we started that. We got into a few episodes.
Strange mix of things, but there's a motif that runs through it is a silver Bentley drives around, sort of not terrorizing them, just sort of like
just following
monitoring them.
Yeah,
and that's right-hand drive, and that really struck me when I noticed that it was a right-hand drive car. I was like, "Ooh, that's strange."
Yeah, I don't know if I recall that, but yes, yeah. I get it. Like I get it after a second, but when I first see the cars coming, I'm thinking they're gonna hit. Oh no, they're not. Never mind.
So my news is also vehicular.
Yes, I know.
We had a big storm on Saturday night, and a huge branch fell out of a tree, and luckily it just missed my 15-year-old car and hit my 5-year-old car. And did $2,600 worth of damage.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that picture that you showed, you got the storm significantly worse than we did over our way.
Yeah, and a colleague at work who lives just the other side of me didn't have anything like what we got, but we had a whole tree down on our street, so we must have had a little micro thing going on.
Yeah.
Because it really pummeled us. But I think I told you, I saw the storm coming, and we have a screened-in porch, and we have a hammock on the screened-in porch, and I thought, well, it'd be nice to sort of just lounge in the hammock and watch the storm. I lasted exactly one crash of lightning, and I was back in the house, like,
hiding under the bed.
Mind. God, it was really something. I mean, we get big storms. I mean, we live in the United States, and you get sort of wild weather here, but that was really...
Yeah.
That's the third car to have been hit by that tree. We have a pine tree at the top of our driveway, and it pummels cars all the time. And you would not believe how many times I've moved the cars down the driveway because a storm is coming, and nothing's happened.
Yep.
And the one time I neglect to do it...
That's when it happens. Yeah. That's the way it goes. Murphy's Law, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tomorrow is April Fool's Day. And
oh, yeah.
Yes, and one thing that basically my wife's life's blood is pranks. She loves pranks. There's very few things she enjoys more than pranks. Basically, when you see her on her phone, she's watching prank videos, or at least that's what she tells me. So, but probably the cruelest prank that she ever played was on her sister, her younger sister, whose birthday happens to be tomorrow. Okay. So Stacy, went bursting into the bathroom where my sister-in-law was taking a bath when they were little. They were, I don't know, like probably junior high, like early teens or something. They're only 2 years apart. She comes bursting into the bathroom. My sister-in-law is in the tub, and she says, "We won the lottery! We won the lottery! We're rich! We're rich!" And my sister-in-law, stark naked, jumps up out of the tub and starts jumping up and down and dancing naked in the tub. And she's like, "Get dressed, come downstairs quick. Mom and Dad, we're celebrating. We're going to have a party." And so Stacy goes tearing back down the stairs, and she comes, she sits in the living room, and my sister-in-law comes, gets dressed and comes thundering down the stairs and comes into the living room, and everyone is just sitting there casually watching TV. And immediately she realized she had been punked. Yeah, that was one of the better ones.
I don't know what to say to that. I mean, I've met Stacy, and she's a delightful lady, but I've always sensed there's a streak to her. But
yes. Imagine what my sister-in-law was thinking in the interim. Like all the cars she was going to buy and all the clothes and houses she was going to buy. Anyway.
It's like the one prank video that I always remember watching was the one where the guy shoots a half-court shot blindfolded.
Oh, that's one of the best, yes.
And the audience is in on it, and they pretend he made it.
I love that.
The best part about that is the audience do the yeah! And then he just goes berserk, of course, and then the audience realise what they've done. And that you can hear the guilt descend. They're like, "Oh, we shouldn't have done this. Whoops. That's not funny." Meanwhile, the guy's spinning round in circles on the floor.
Anyway, we do have a long episode, so I guess we should get to it.
Down to business. Where was Dany last time we saw her? It has been a while, because we're at chapter 12 and we haven't seen Dany this book.
Nope.
But last time we saw her, she was doing something quite memorable. Even I remember what Dany was doing last time we saw her. Drogo's Khalasar had disbanded and gone their separate ways, leaving Dany with only around 100 riders just south of the Dothraki Sea in the middle of Essos. And then she did the whole adding herself and her dragon eggs to Drogo's funeral pyre, leading to the hatching of the 3 baby dragons and her own miraculous survival. So why don't we give them a summary of this one?
All right. Dany and her motley Khalasar need a direction. None seem great. North into the Dothraki Sea would see them destroyed by the first Khalasar that they encountered. Not even the lands south of the Dothraki Sea, the lands of the Lazarene, are safe. Even those peaceful shepherds could beat Dany's meager forces. West, down the Skahazadhan River, toward the port cities of Yunkai, Meereen, and Astapor, would be the easiest route, but a large portion of Drogo's Khalasar went that way under newly minted Khal Pono, and she definitely needs to avoid them.
The comet seems to point southeast to the desert known as the Red Waste, so Dany chooses to see the conjunction of necessity and omen as auspicious, and they head that way. Crossing the desert is about as miserable as you would expect. People die, horses get eaten. Doreah, the handmaiden, dies. Dany's milk dries up, so she weans the dragons onto cooked horse flesh. They don't eat raw meat. They cook it. They're dragons. Why would
dragons and humans.
Mm-hmm. She names the 3 dragons, and each day a different one gets to ride on her shoulder while the other 2 are caged.
When it seems that all is lost, Outriders report that they have found a city. They approach and find that the place is abandoned and desolate. The Dothraki, so brave in battle, and so fearful in just about everything else, want to avoid the ghosts, but Dany wants a roof. Within, they find clean water wells, fruit trees, and enough grass to restore the horses, and some much-needed respite. The Khalasar takes a breather in what they dub Vase Toloro, the City of Bones.
Dany gets a sand bath from her remaining handmaids. Her hair is beginning to grow back. Sir Jorah, perhaps sensing bath time, pays a visit. Dany, wrapped only in her white lion skin, asks Jorah for his story. He was married twice, once to a Glover of Deepwood Mott. This was an arranged marriage. She died in childbirth to a stillborn child. And then, when he was a lord of Bear Island, to Lynesse Hightower of Oldtown. It was to keep her in the manner she'd become accustomed to that he transgressed and lost favour with Ned Stark, fled Westeros with Lynesse, and lost her to a rich merchant while Jorah was selling his sword.
Dany is moved by his story and asks if he hates Lynesse now. He replies that he hates and loves her in equal measure, and adds that she looked a lot like Dany. Having dropped that little bombshell, he withdraws, leaving Dany to interpret the message. She comes to the conclusion that he loves her as a man loves a woman, not as a knight loves his queen. Dany tries to fantasize about Ser Jorah, but it's no good. He keeps morphing into Drogo. She believes herself barren, as Mirri Maz Duur told her, so wonders why any man would want her, but also wonders how any future man could compare to Drogo.
Next day, Dany sends her 3 blood riders out with spare horses and lots of water to scout ahead, southeast, south and southwest. She doesn't want to risk the desert again without knowing there is a place to arrive at. First back is Roccaro, who went due south and fairly quickly hit the sea. No signs of habitation or life. Next to return is Argo. He found a couple more abandoned cities, but none of them any more worthwhile than where they currently rested. Last, after he'd almost been given up for dead, Drogo returns from the southeast. He'd found the city of Qarth and brought back 3 of its dignitaries who really, really want to meet those dragons.
Really want to meet them. They traipsed across the Red Waste to meet them, so they must really want to meet them.
Well, only a certain distance across the Red Waste. I mean, not like
True.
all the way across the Red Waste
Yes.
like the Khalasar did, you know. The one thing, just something that occurred to me as you were saying it was, Dany tries to fantasize about sort of like being with Ser Jorah, and she can't do it because he keeps morphing into Drogo. If I was Ser Jorah and I knew that that's what she thought, I would be like, I'm okay with that. That's fine. You can think about anybody else.
I won't know anyway.
Exactly. You can call me Drogo. I don't care. Just a point.
Yep.
I'm not proud. Sorry. So one thing I noticed is that plenty of people in this book are using that comet for their own ends. Pretty much, no matter what you want to say, you can say, well, the comet says it.
Yes.
Clearly the comet says that I should get a pay rise, boss.
Dany thinks that the comet is, signifies her ascension to power. And of course, basically she just needs to join at the back of the line because pretty much everyone else has had the same thought about themselves, including Theon and Edmure Tully. So
right.
You can understand the new kings thinking that, but Theon and Edmure Tully, that's...
and Hot something. Pie, obviously.
And, yes. Oh. Now, we, as Simon mentioned earlier, we haven't seen Dany in a while. It was actually the last chapter of Game of Thrones was the last time we saw her. And in that chapter, we did a background on the Red Waste. So just a quick reminder, we mentioned that there are several ruined cities, like I think it was Argo found. And they were all likely destroyed by the Dothraki, mostly during the Century of Blood, which is the 100 years that followed the Doom of Valyria. So about 300 to 400 years ago. And that also once upon a time, the Red Waste was a much fertile place. So wasn't always so wasted, I guess.
Yeah. So one of the reasons they went that way was because they wanted to avoid the lands of the Lázarine. Lázarine, if you remember, the shepherds, peaceful, but Dany's Khalasar is just not up to a fight, and so even the peaceful Lázarine would probably tear them apart. And with good reason, because it was Khal Drogo's Khalasar that killed and enslaved many of their people.
Yes, that's where they met Mirri Maz Duur, and things really went downhill for Khal Drogo after that.
Yes, quite.
And so Calpono, who used to be one of Drogo's co's, he has taken a large portion, around 10,000 of Drogo's old Khalasar, and a whole bunch of slaves, and headed towards Slaver's Bay down the Skahazadhan River to the port cities in Slaver's Bay. So that wouldn't be a good direction for them to go in. And Jorah says, well, what does that matter? Why should I be afraid of Kopono? He was always friendly to me and nice to me. And Jorah says, well, Kopono might have been nice to you, but Kalpono will kill you. And I wondered about that. I wondered if Kalpono would kill Dany, or if he would have her sent back to the Dosh Khaleen, because she is a Khaleesi, and so she is honored and respected as such. So it depends on if he feels like she's now overstepped her boundaries.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. She's not abiding by the terms of her Khaleesi-ness, and so she forfeited the right to a quiet retirement in Vaes Dothrak.
Right. Yeah, that could be. That definitely could be.
And plus, she's got dragons that he's going to want.
Yes.
If she didn't have dragons, he might be like, no, really, off to Vaes Dothrak with you. But
slap her on the wrist.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, although, if it hadn't been for the dragons, she would be on her way back to the Dosh Khaleen anyway.
True.
Because they weren't sticking around to be part of her Khalasar without them.
Yeah. Yeah, because it really is a losing proposition right now, this Khalasar. While these dragons are just little babies that are completely vulnerable, this is a seriously weak force to have at your disposal.
Yep. Not only could the Lazarene defeat them, probably the sheep that the Lazarene tend to could defeat them.
Yeah, so basically the Khalasar is said to comprise women, sick old men, and boys whose hair have never been braided. Remember, the men get their hair braided after military victories.
Yeah, so we're dealing with some young boys here. Although we don't know any of these young unbraided boys, but it sounds like a pretty golden opportunity for some of the boys to step up and make a name for him or themselves.
But you say that, but literally all that's going on in this chapter is trying not to die.
True, that is all that's going on.
So,
but there's got to be opportunity here, because she...
Yes, long term, maybe, but right this chapter, it's just like, try and live.
Yeah, Jorah says, you've got 100 strong Khalasar, and she thinks, I've got 4. Basically, her 3 blood riders and Jorah is about all she's got.
Yeah.
So, but then the first person to die on their way through the Red Waste is an old man, and the blood flies swarm his corpse, and then what, as her description says, spread the ill luck to the living. And yeah, I mean, it's sad that he died, but to live as long as he did, to have lived to the point where he's lost his teeth and has cloudy, milky eyes as a Dothraki, seems like he must have been pretty lucky to make it to such a ripe old age. Yeah. So
he's probably like in his late 20s or something.
Yeah. Could be, yeah.
Yeah. So over the course of this chapter, they lose about a third of their 100-person Khalasar. They're dropping like flies. And
yeah,
it's pretty rough. Grim.
Yeah.
So we hear that she weans the dragons onto cooked horse flesh, which of course tells us that she had been suckling the dragons to this point. So she's clearly forging a maternal bond with them. But then her milk dries up because of malnutrition, so they're forced to eat meat. Jorah makes the point that the dragon eggs were unbelievably valuable, but the living dragons magnify that many-fold.
Oh, yeah.
And so nobody outside the Khalasar can be trusted around those dragons. So it's a precarious situation. The dragons themselves are much too small to defend themselves, and the Khalasar is too small to defend the dragons. So everything's a bit tenuous now. They need to find allies, and quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. They have probably the most precious commodities in the known world, and they're about as weak a force and as tenuous a situation as you could find yourself in. So, yeah, they need to remedy that.
I think I know the answer to this, but do you feel like she might be willing to sell one of them?
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes. Oh boy, I don't know. The way she thinks about them, she thinks about how basically everyone has been taken from her and that the gods are not taking these dragons from her. Yeah. And even when Jorah says, Kalpono catches up with you, he's going to take those dragons rather than kill them, which he could easily do if he wanted to. And she defensively says, they're mine. So, but, if it comes down to it, possibly if it's between that and complete destruction. Yeah. Yeah. Well, although one thing I noticed was that she mentions that the dragons were born from her faith and need. And it reminded me of what you said about how the dragons happened to be born right at the time when the Seven Kingdoms were falling apart. The dragons died out when they were basically no longer needed because the Targaryens had a pretty good hold on the realm. Right. And now as the realm is in trouble, dragons have been reborn. And so...
not just her need, perhaps, but but Westeros's need.
Right. And like we were saying a little bit ago, they were also her salvation because both Jogo and the rest of the Khos would have taken her to the Dosh Khaleen, which is exactly what Rakaro said when she named him Kho and gave him the gift of I think he got the Arak, maybe? I don't remember. Yes. But whichever gift he got, he said, I'll take this, but I'm still taking you back to the Dosh Khaleen. So,
unless you pull some kind of stunt in the next 12 hours.
Right. Oh. You've got 12 hours to impress me.
So she names the dragons. The green one, there's a green dragon. She names it Rhaegal for her.
Oh, those are backward.
have you messed this up? The notes are broken at this point. So the green one is Rhaegal, named for her brother Rhaegar, and perhaps her son. She says it's for Rhaegar, but her son was going to be called
Rhaego, which is pretty close. Yeah.
The cream and gold one is Viserion for her brother Viserys, who, frankly, I would have called it Mirimas-Dur before I called it Viserys. But so Viserion, that's the one she'll sell.
Yes.
And then the black one, she's called Drogon, presumably named for her husband.
Yeah, she doesn't make that clear, but it seems pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And she says that Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives' dragons were named for Valyrian gods, but she named hers for those that the gods have taken away from her. And I started thinking about it, and she's 14, and she has lost her mom, her dad, both of her brothers, Willem Darry, who was in charge of her after they left Dragonstone, her husband, and her child.
And Doreah.
And Doreah. Yes, poor sweet Doreah.
And well, I'm curious about this actually. Her silver didn't get mentioned in the book, did it? Her horse.
Only that she swung up onto it when they rode off. So just a quick reference.
I'll mention it again when we get to the TV show.
One thing I promised to do in the last chapter, Dany 10, which was the last chapter of A Game of Thrones, is we mentioned that dragons bond with the rider and only allow one rider. They'll accept a second rider as long as their bonded rider is with that other rider. Right. I promised to look into if a rider can ride more than one dragon. So if another dragon is not taken by a rider, could, say, Dany ride all three of these if she so chose. And there's not a whole lot of evidence one way or the other, but there's one bit of evidence where later, and actually it's a much later, Dany says to a character that no rider has ever flown two dragons. So
there we go.
That's what we have to go on right now.
she's only got one bottom. So.
She only needs one at a time. That's right. She only needs one period, really.
Yeah. So when they arrive at the city that they name Vias Toloro, because it's the city of bones, Dany assumes that the Dothraki have been here before. One thing she notices is that there's a plinth with a statue missing, and we noted when they were in Vias Dothrak that the Dothraki steal the statues of the gods of the people they conquer.
Right.
So that's a pretty good clue that this was a Dothraki pillaging that led to the end of Vias Toloro.
Yeah. And Irri and Jiqui are super spooked by the fact that this place is abandoned and there's all these bones everywhere. And, Irri keeps talking about the ghosts and tells Dany, we must not stay here, Khaleesi. This is their place. And I was thinking, you've got to be awfully superstitious to want to leave the relative comfort and safety of this place to go back out into the Red Waste because you're scared of the ghosts.
Let me talk me through this, Irri. We've got fruit trees and wells and a roof, and you want to go back out in the desert. Right. That's what you're telling me.
You're welcome to sleep out there.
That thing could, Scooby-Doo me and I wouldn't move.
Oh, man. So, every time I think of Scooby-Dooing, I think of when my old office in your building on the first floor.
Oh, yeah.
When it was offered to me and our administrator was like, you don't want that office. You don't want to go. You don't want to take that office. I was like, why is she so insistent that I don't want this office? I was expecting her to try and Scooby-Doo.
Did you ever understand why she was so opposed to it?
I don't really. But she just kept saying it was loud and I wouldn't want to be down there. But I never found any issues with it. But yeah, I kept expecting her to jump out of behind the door with the mask on to try and Scooby-Doo me out of it.
just while you were making yourself a quadruple decker sandwich.
Yeah.
So after Dany's bath, Jorah comes to pay her a visit, and she doesn't dress. She just wraps herself in the lion's skin that Drogo gave her. And while he's telling his sad story, it drapes off her shoulder. She's got to know what she's doing to this poor guy. I mean, he's clearly smitten with her. And anyway, but his story is very sad, and the fact that his wife looks like Dany just adds sort of a poignancy to it. I will say in passing that when he describes his first wife as a Glover from Deepwood Mart, right. I'm like, this is the only time in the whole canon of Westeros and Essos that we're ever going to have a chance to know the name of your first wife, and you skipped it. You didn't tell us what she was called.
Yeah. He refers to her as a plain-faced woman, and I thought, she's got to be quite the every person for her husband of 10 years to forget her name. She was a Glover of Deepwood Moss. Maybe
this Lynesse Hightower really blew his mind.
I guess so. I was married
she
before,
died in childbirth,
right?
Maybe third child, fourth. I don't remember. So he meets Lynesse Hightower at a tourney arranged in Lannisport to celebrate the victory over the Greyjoys in the Greyjoy Rebellion.
Yeah.
Jorah fought bravely alongside Robert and Ned and the others to defeat them at Pike. And so a tourney was held, and at the tourney he met Lynesse Hightower, and she was very beautiful, and he asked her for her favour, and he was amazed when he got it, and he wore it throughout, and despite admitting himself that he wasn't particularly good in tournaments,
right.
He was...
Yeah.
You don't think of Bear Island as being somewhere where you do a lot of jousting. It's more like wrestling with bears,
Right.
He did really well. I mean, he defeated a lot of people that we know are significantly good at fighting. Right. He beat Jason Mallister, Bronze Jon Royce, a pair of Freys, Sir Boris Blunt of the Kingsguard, Lyle Strongbore Crakehall, and even tied with Jaime Lannister in the final, which is really something.
Right, so and he got he won by King's decision. So
right,
either the king was annoyed with his wife at the moment and didn't want to reward Jaime, or maybe he out-jousted him.
Yeah, so it does show that Jorah is quite the swordsman, or at least quite the fighter. I mean, the fact that he's this good, even if he's he was particularly inspired that day by Lynesse Hightower.
Right.
It's good that he's got these kind of skills for Dany's future.
Yeah, and now one thing we know, thanks to the Theon chapter last week, is that this was about 10 years ago, because we know that Theon has been gone from Iron Islands for 10 years,
10 years,
so we
yes.
can put a kind of a time frame with it. But I was thinking, as I was reading this part, he was on quite a roll. He was the new lord because his father had taken the black and he became the lord of Bear Island. He was newly a knight because he won his knighthood during the Greyjoy Rebellion. He won his first tournament and he got a new wife.
Yeah, replacing the one that was so forgettable he couldn't remember her first name.
Exactly. Yeah. But
yeah,
a quick little thing about Lynesse and Jorah is that there is quite the age disparity. He says she was half my age, and he's pretty close. He is roughly around 35, and she is roughly around 18. So,
So he's 45 now?
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So the first problem there is that, by and large, 18-year-olds and 35-year-olds don't often have a great deal in common. So they were already facing an uphill battle there. But of course, Walder Frey would not see any issue with that.
No. Jorah felt that she was way above him and also young and beautiful, so he wasn't expecting a yes when he asked for her hand. He was expecting a contemptuous refusal.
And he was right. He should. he should have expected that, because when you take a look at her siblings, most of her siblings, the married ones anyway, have married significantly higher lords than Jorah. So if we start with the heir, Balon Hightower, he married Rhonda Rowan, which is the House Rowan is a pretty lofty house in the Reach, but his station as the heir to House Hightower is more important than hers. But then the big winner of the siblings is Allery, who's the second daughter. She married Mace Tyrell, Lord Paramount of the Reach, and she is also Loras and Marjorie Tyrell's mother. So that's a you can't get much bigger in the Reach than marrying Mace Tyrell. So Then Lynesse's older sister Denise, who's the third in line, she married Desmond Redwine, and the Redwines are a pretty powerful house in the Reach as well. It's unknown his relation to Paxter, head of House Redwine, but still, the name Redwine says something about a person. Now, the oldest daughter, Melora, she is unmarried and lives with her father in Hightower, and she's kind of, there's a lot of rumors going around about her. She's kind of unusual, I guess. It's said that she dabbles in magic, and they refer to her as the Mad Maid. But then her sister Layla, who's the fourth daughter, she probably married the closest as far as loftiness of your lordship to Jorah. She married Sir John Cups of the Reach, and there is no information about House Cups. So
right, but I guess you might give a fourth daughter to a house that's aspiring to more.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, you can't always marry up. Sometimes you're going to marry down for the benefit that it accrues that family too. So yeah,
right.
I can believe it.
And then we've got her sister that's directly just slightly older than her, Alysanne, the fifth daughter. She married Lord Arthur Ambrose, who is the head of House Ambrose of the Reach. So again, not only the Tyrells are really, could you consider a step up from the Hightowers, because the Hightowers are one of the ancient and most...
but the Redwines and the Rowans are at the same kind of level,
Yeah, so...
one thing that's interesting about that is they're all from the Reach. So Lynesse is the only one to marry outside the Reach, which is interesting. I would have thought that you might have more marriages between the regions to sort of try and cement alliances between the regions, not just within. Especially when you've got this many daughters, you've got a lot of opportunity here.
Right. Yes, he's got 6 daughters, so he's got a lot to marry out there. But I started to wonder, why did Lord Leighton agree? I mean, her, a Hightower, Jorah, yes, Simon's holding up the number 6. Him, a lower lord from tiny island in the northwest. And, I thought maybe that he knew that she had vanity issues and was hoping that life on Bear Island would help fix that, possibly. Or maybe she had a reputation as being difficult, and the other houses from the Reach and elsewhere were aware of it and weren't interested in marrying her into the family. And Jorah hadn't heard such things, so he was like, oh, wow, she's available. That's great.
Yeah.
I'll marry her.
One
maybe
other
it's
idea,
because...
Actually, just before you get onto that, one other idea I just want to interject at this point. Jorah had just had this like amazing run of things that have happened to him, making him suddenly quite attractive as a match,
Yeah.
Especially because he's just been knighted by Robert. He's just won the tournament in front of Robert and Ned. It might be politically savvy to say, I'll get my sixth daughter to marry him, and Robert will be pleased with that,
Oh, yeah. Catch him on the rise. He's
exactly.
He was on his way up. I see.
Plus, compounding the fact you're getting rid of the troublesome one,
Yeah, but it's also very possible is that he has 10 kids, 6 of whom are daughters, and he wanted to kick her out of the high tower. And as the youngest daughter, he was like, marry anyone you want. I really don't care at this point. So, but it was also, she's 18. She's the daughter of a very prominent house. And according to Jorah, she is very beautiful. So I was a little bit surprised that she was not already betrothed to someone. So,
yeah.
But like you said, all the other spouses have married someone from the Reach. So, or all the other siblings have spouses from the Reach. So if he was wanting to expand beyond the Reach, I did a little thinking about who might have been a good match. And Edmure Tully is just about the same age as Lynesse. So, I don't know. I mean, Edmure is still single, so...
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, but maybe the Tullys would see it as a bit of an insult if the Hightowers offered their sixth daughter.
To the heir of Riverrun.
To the heir to Riverrun, yeah. That's the problem there. I mean, second daughter maybe, first daughter better,
Right.
Sixth daughter, you're just trying to offload her. You'd be selling her to Bear Island if you could,
Well, there's always a fray. I'm sure there's a fray that's around her age. Now, he mentions that, Jorah mentions that Lynesse's great uncle was the White Bull who commanded Dany's father's Kingsguard, and he's referring to Sir Gerald Hightower, who died at the Tower of Joy fighting against Ned and company, and he was alongside Sir Arthur Dane and Sir Oswald Went. So you might remember that. We talked about that back in a Ned chapter previously.
Yep.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
So, Jorah tried to keep Lynesse in the manner to which she was accustomed and failed abysmally. He was forced to borrow heavily from moneylenders while he was in Braavos. Braavos is kind of the banking centre of the world. The Iron Bank is based there, and it's not clear that that's who he borrowed from, but it seems likely. They have a fearsome reputation for debt collecting, so...
Yeah. You froze there, so I
Jorah
don't know.
was certainly getting himself into hot water.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that doesn't sound like folks you want to cross. Of course, then when he fled... when he fled Bear Island from Ned, he fled to Essos, to the Free Cities. So... he was certainly making it easier on them to find him, I guess, if they had chosen to do so. But he says that he did things that shamed him to speak of for the gold to keep his wife Lynesse happy, to keep her jewels, Harper, and her cook. And what he's referring to is that he sold poachers to a Tyrashi slave. We learned that back in Ned 2. And also from Ned 2, we learned that happened around 293 AC. So that was about 5 to 6 years ago, which means he and Lynesse were married for about 4 to 5 years before they fled Westeros.
Right. So, I mean, they gave it a go.
Yeah, hey,
There has been talk about why he didn't take the black like his father, but I mean, clearly he was still in love with Lynesse and was willing to flee his home, give up his lordship to be with her.
Yeah. He put an awful lot of effort into keeping her. It'd be hard to imagine him just being like, "Oh well, we tried. Ned's on his way."
You stay here and entertain Ned Stark. I'm out of here.
Yeah, we had talked. I don't remember which chapter about why he didn't try and take the black and go be with his father at the Wall, but this is clearly the reason why. Now, we have to keep in mind that this is his version of the story. All stories have more than one perspective, so, she could maybe be like, I didn't care about any of these things, but he just wouldn't listen. He kept buying me stuff, and I would be like, Jorah, we can't afford this. So,
Good point. So, as I mentioned, Dany's wearing her Hrakar skin after the wine poisoning attempt in the Western Market of Dothraki. Drogo returned with a carcass of a Hrakar, which is a white lion, and made her a cloak of the skin. That, of course, was the point at which, when Drogo learned of what the attempt on her life, he determined that they would go to Westeros.
Yeah, he forgot about the Hrakar and was a little more focused on the murder attempt there.
Yes.
So then, it's at the end of this story, Dany asks Jorah, what did she look like? And he said, well, she looked a bit like you, Daenerys. And from that, she makes she comes to the realization that he is in love with her more than just, loving his queen as a knight, but loves her as a man loves a woman. And like Simon just said a little bit ago, he is now 45 and she is 14, which is the exact same age gap as my daughter and me. So to me, this is especially problematic and especially disturbing. So I like Jorah. I like to I like to think Jorah is a good guy, but that's I don't even know what more to say about that other than that, that's a problematic situation.
Yeah. But to be fair, he's fallen for her. He isn't actively making any moves towards her.
That's
apart
true.
From perhaps dropping the occasional hint that she looks like the woman he loved.
Yeah, she jumped immediately, thought, oh, he's in love with me. He didn't necessarily say anything overtly that,
When you're young and pretty, you can make that assumption fairly often, so. And you're usually going to be right.
Maybe that's why I'm so unaccustomed to it.
Yeah. You're like, why would she assume that?
Right.
Kelly, she's very different from you.
Yes. Well, our haircuts are pretty similar.
So Dany mentions that she's pretty sure she can't have kids, and so she's the last of the Targaryens, officially the end of the Targaryen line. There are no others in existence.
Yeah, if she believes Miri Masdar is the one that told her that. So, we've talked about this prophecy stuff as well as but if Miri Masdar is correct and she can't have kids, that could be a problem because no matter what she accomplishes, it ends with her. So and what happens to these dragons? Dragons can live hundreds of years. She's not going to have any lineage to learn to ride and control these dragons.
And you need Valyrian blood to be a dragon rider.
There is heavy evidence of that, yes. Right. Now, of course, there are other houses on Westeros with Valyrian blood. The Valerians, for instance, they are descendants of Old Valyria, but they weren't dragon riders in Old Valyria. So, but they have mixed with Targaryens a lot over the years. So, maybe there's enough Targaryen blood mixed in with their blood that it might help. And the Celtigars are actually also of Valyrian blood. So might be something you could work with there.
Yeah, interesting. So the three Blood Riders head south, southwest, southeast. The first two are busts. But interestingly, this is a good point you've made here, Mackelly. I'm sorry I'm stealing your thunder here, but this is Mackelly's point. Jogo followed the comet, and he found Qarth. The comet was pointing in the right direction the whole time. This is why the comet's in the sky. It's for Jogo.
It was for Jogo. That's what he was thinking when he came across Qarth. He was like, "This comet is for me."
So the citizens of Qarth want to see the dragons, but Jorah's words ought to ring alarm bells. The three people that come back with Jogo are Pyat Pri, the great warlock he introduces himself as, Jaro Joan Daxos, one of the 13, the elders of Qarth, and self-described as a merchant prince of Qarth, and Quaith of the Shadow, who's a female. I'm not quite sure what her story is.
Yeah, all those names are quite impressive, except for of the 13. That's not quite as impressive as the Great Warlock and Quaith of the Shadow, but we don't know exactly what they mean yet, but we'll have to keep an eye on what those titles mean, because they led with them.
Yeah, but Jorah's right. I mean, obviously they've got no choice. They're being welcomed into a city. They've got to say yes, because they've got no alternatives.
Right.
But they are uniquely vulnerable at this point.
Yeah, what happens if these people draw her and her dragons into Qarth and then decide they're going to take the dragons? I mean, who and how could they stop them from doing that? Now, I thought it was a bit hasty of her to acknowledge the dragon's presence, because so Jogo says, these three have come to look upon you, and I think it was Quaith says, we're here to see the dragons, and she says, well, you've found them. And I thought, they could leave and come back with an army, Like, they're so vulnerable here.
Yeah, but it's much easier to bring the mouse into the trap than to bring the trap to the mouse. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
Okay, so you got some background?
Yeah, I did a little bit. I knew this was going to be a long chapter, so I just kind of hit the high points here, but thought we'd talk a little bit about House Hightower, since Jorah's wife, Lynesse, was a member of that family. They are one of the oldest and most powerful of the noble houses in Westeros, and their seat is the Hightower, located in the city of Oldtown, which is in the Reach. As a House of the Reach, they owe fealty to House Tyrell, and the Hightower sigil is a white watchtower with a fire on top on smoke gray, and their motto is, "We light the way." Their castle is literally a high tower that rises high above the city of Oldtown, and it is located atop an island called Battle Isle, where the Honeywine River widens into the Whispering Sound. Now, the tower has a beacon of fire on its top that acts as a lighthouse to guide ships into port. However, the color of the fire can be changed to mean different things. For instance, if the fire is green, it signifies the calling of House Hightower's banners. The family also owns a Valyrian steel sword named Vigilance. There's much more about House Hightower that we'll get into later.
Okay, good. Comparison with the television show, almost all of this, I mean, it is pretty grim. A lot of this chapter is just like, if you take 100 people and some horses across a desert, they're going to die. And that's what a lot of this chapter is, sort of like.
That's what happens.
The TV show condenses that basically into a single scene in which Dany Silver dies.
Oh.
Yeah. Or at least collapses. You don't actually see it die, but it collapses and you don't see it again. So
okay.
Presumed dead. So what happens then is the Khalasar just stops right there. They never find Vias Toloro. That's not in the show at all. She sends out the 3 Blood Riders from that point. They just they just sit in the desert waiting for them to come back. Rakaro returns minus his body. His head is in a satchel, and the horse is sent back. And Jorah supposes it was probably Cal Pono who found him and has sent them back.
Wow.
Decapitated.
Okay. I didn't remember that at all.
Irio Jikwi, whichever one it was in love with Rakaro, is obviously stricken by this event.
Okay.
Then another Blood Rider, never named, let's call him Jogo, comes back on a fresh horse and says that he found Qarth 3 days' ride away and that they'll be welcomed. But he's on his own. Nobody from Qarth is with him. It's just him.
Okay.
But one thing that's slightly interesting about that is, so Dany has a slightly slow start to this book. She has a very slow start to the second season of the show. So everything I've just described there, that's the first 4 episodes of the season for Dany.
Wow.
She hardly anything. She's hardly in it at all.
Yeah. Wow. 4 episodes just to get this.
Yeah, she had basically the first half of the scene was in episode 2 and the second half was in episode 4. The scene where she sends out the Blood Riders is episode 2, and when they come back, it's episode 4.
Oh, wow. Okay. Slow start. We'll see how it goes, though.
Yeah. I mean, she's got dragons. She doesn't have to prove anything now.
That's a good point.
She's gonna ride that high for a while. Pedantry corner. I've got a few this time.
You do.
If a Dothraki comes knocking on your door and you're a grandee of the city of Qarth, do you just hitch up your camel and ride out across the desert on his word without even taking a servant with you? The 3 grandees just rode out.
All 3 of them were just like, sure, we'll go.
Yeah. I mean, the Dothraki are not great planners, not great strategists, but a huge Dothraki horde could be waiting just over the horizon for suckers to come wandering out.
I take your point, yes.
Mm-hmm. So, Ricardo went due south. From an approximation of the location of Vias Tolaro, it would appear he would have hit the coast very close to the town of Carcash.
Yeah.
Did he hit the coast, paddle his feet in the sea, and then just ride back without even looking a couple of miles up and down the coast?
He never turned his head east or west.
Well, he got what he deserved in the TV show then. And lastly for me, Dany once again claims that Khal Drogo died with his hair uncut, and few men could claim that. I still don't understand this.
Me either.
Because given how murderous the Dothraki are, I'd be amazed if almost all of them didn't die with their hair uncut.
Right, because they would die when they got into a fight.
Right. I wonder if they cut the hair off their defeated foes.
So rather than killing them, they just cut their hair.
No, I mean after they killed them. If they go around the battlefield cutting their hair off.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Whereas he died in his friend's arms, and so he died, he was...
Yeah, I get... I absolutely agree with you, and I've had trouble wrapping my head around this whole thing too. Maybe we're just not understanding it correctly, but I guess my take in what she means by this is that a fight breaks out between 2 Dothraki. One of them beats the other up but doesn't kill him. He then shaves his head. Something like that.
You know what I'm going with this? I've never seen a Dothraki fight another Dothraki that hasn't led to at least one of them dying.
Yes, exactly.
They never don't kill each other.
That's why I'm saying that first guy to die in the Red Waste, he must have been pretty good and pretty lucky to have lived this long. In
the show, Iri or Jikwi, whichever one is bereft when Ricardo comes back, minus his body, is particularly upset the fact that she can't burn him. And so he won't be able to ride in the Nightlands. So she thinks they've killed his soul.
Yeah, sure. So I had one that I'm going to do a little reading like I like to do.
Read us a story, Mackelly.
Tell me how this goes. So when they see the city in the distance, the distant white walls promise rest and safety. Dany says, "Go ahead of us and learn the name of this city." And then, they go, the Blood Riders go and come back. Her riders are not long in returning. Dany put her heels into her horse and showed them the way, trotting beneath the shattered arch of an ancient gate and down a silent street. How did she get to the gate when they came back to her? And then Jikwi and Iri are like, "No, we can't do that. We can't go there. Such places are best to be shunned, it is known." And then she says, "Not to me," puts her heels into her horse and trots beneath the gate. And I thought, wait a second. But the Blood Riders came back to them. They didn't tell the Blood Riders, "Go to the city, hang out there till we get there, and then we'll all ride in together." So
maybe, I can see what you're saying, but maybe you're missing the fact that when she puts her heels to her horse and trots, she trots for a while and
Yes.
then goes through the gates. It just
Yes,
they didn't
I
actually
guess.
say that, but that's what's happening. Trots and trots and trots and trots and trots and trots and finally gets
Just-
through the gate.
Because just shortening
if they can
Yeah.
see it, it can't be that far away by horse. I mean, it can only
Yeah.
be a few
Although it
minutes
said
away.
the city in the distance. The city was in the distance. So to me, it felt like they were just seeing the city across the Red Waste, just
Yeah.
visible out there.
You got a point.
Anyway.
News and notes.
Well, on the heels of the Game of Thrones prequel development talk that we mentioned last episode, George Martin just signed a 5-year deal with HBO. On top of the what's thought to be the 5 A Song of Ice and Fire shows currently in development that we've talked about, he's working on 2 non-A Song of Ice and Fire shows. He will be executive producing a post-apocalyptic show called Who Fears Death, which is an adaptation of Nnedi Okofor's novel, and a show called Road Marks, which is an adaptation of Robert Zielinski's 1979 novel. The deal with HBO is thought to be in the mid 8 figures. So basically,
what do you mean by mid 8 figures? Like 50?
I don't know.
15?
That's all it said is mid 8 figures. I figure it's probably about what we make on this show. Oh, that would be lose. Sorry. And he's not done. George Martin is also taking his talents to Broadway. He is writing a play about the tourney of Harrenhal that's expected to begin on Broadway in 2023. So,
well, I read that one myself actually, and I was interested that that's what he would focus on, because one thing that I have learned from doing this podcast is how seminal that tournament is, how it is.
Oh yeah,
the
right.
fulcrum of the entire story is that tournament.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a good choice, because obviously you couldn't do the rest of it in one stage play. You'd be there for weeks.
The intermissions would be days long. So basically, everything I just said, what that all means is that we're never getting Winds of Winter. Which
I gotta say, if you paid me 8 figures to do pretty much anything, it would be hard to make me write another 2,000 pages of a book. I'd be like, what do I need to do that for?
Yeah.
I got all this money.
We got a message from a listener named Sloan that we interact with fairly often, and she said basically the same thing I said, that we're never getting Winds of Winter now. So, but yeah, you're right. That eight figure salary will.
It's hardly a spur to.
You're right. They're not
How
saying
hungry
we'll pay
are you, George?
Yeah, we're not going to pay you 8 figures to finish the story that you started a million years ago.
Exactly. He's going to make tens of thousands off that. Meanwhile,
right.
Do you have a review?
So I thought I'd do a short one because I knew this was going to be a long episode. So this review is from someone who called themselves Catelyn is the Worst. And
I'm guessing not a fan.
Yeah. And this is on Apple Podcasts. The subject is great podcast. So right off the bat, I like it. If you have either a minor interest in the world of Ice and Fire or consider yourself an expert, this podcast is very enjoyable and insightful.
Well, hurrah. Thank you. Thank you, Catelyn is the Worst.
Yes, thank you. Finally, before we wrap up here, just want to mention that we're having a lot of fun in our Discord server. Just today, we got a spoiler channel set up in there, and so we've been talking about all kinds of conspiracy theories and plot theories about Lord Varys. So that's been fun.
Interesting.
And so if you want to join that, the link is on both our show notes page and our main Ghosts of Harrenhal page. Yeah, we're having a lot of fun in there.
Check it out. All right, so let's conclude. So Dany has further thinned her mighty herd. So she's down to about 66 now, it would appear.
Yes.
Plus 3 dragons.
Right. Which someday will count for much more than that, but not at the moment.
But the citizens of Qarth did send out dignitaries, not an army, so it does seem that she'll be afforded at least some respect. But how much trust she can give anyone when she owns something as valuable as dragons is hard to estimate.
That's the issue. Jorah's right. Every greedy person in Essos is going to want those dragons for themselves. So she must tread very carefully here.
And Dany thinks that Jorah might be in love with her because she's young and beautiful. Oh, the pains of being young and beautiful.
Now, like I said, he didn't exactly proclaim his love, but as Simon pointed out, she probably picked up on such things much easier than I would. But it does look like their time in the Red Waste might be coming to an end soon. So
thankfully, yes, because it was grim reading, so I'm happy for that to be over.
Yeah.
So, as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at ghostsharrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and now Discord.
And if you wouldn't mind going out and leaving us a 5-star rate and or a really nice review, we certainly would appreciate that. And hey, we might read it right here in a future episode.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.